She boarded the red-eye flight with nothing but a crying baby, an overstuffed diaper bag, and the kind of exhaustion that makes your bones feel hollow. By the time the plane touched down, a stranger in a navy suit had held her child, offered her rest, and, without ever meaning to, given her life a second chance. What began as a flight she couldn't afford became a journey she never expected, and a future she never dared to dream. Hello family, welcome to True Life Stories. Please subscribe and leave a like for us, it means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The fluorescent lights of LAX flickered weakly above a sea of tired travelers, their faces cast in weary indifference as they shuffled through the late-night security line. Rachel Carter shifted her weight from foot to foot, cradling her 6-month-old daughter Lily in the crook of one arm and dragging a fraying diaper bag with the other. The baby stirred, then fussed, a soft, warning whimper escaping her lips. Rachel bounced her gently, whispering, "Shoo, it's okay, mi amor, almost there." The words were hopeful lies, spoken more for her own sanity than the child's comfort. Her back ached. Her eyelids felt like sandpaper. She hadn't slept more than 40 minutes at a time in days. Just a few more hours. Then Chicago. Then Chanel's wedding. She wasn't sure if her sister even wanted her there. Their last phone call had ended in tense silence after Rachel declined to be a bridesmaid. She couldn't afford the dress, let alone the plane ticket. But blood was blood, and Rachel wasn't going to let old grudges rob Lily of her family. The gate agent finally called her boarding group, and Rachel rushed forward, avoiding eye contact with the suit-wearing businessman behind her who kept glancing at his watch. As she stepped onto the plane, she felt the pull of gravity, not just from the cabin pressure, but from the weight of her circumstances. Her whole life fit in a duffel bag and a baby carrier. Economy class was predictably cramped. Her seat was in the back, between a husky middle-aged woman who immediately claimed the armrest and an empty spot she prayed would remain vacant. As she settled in, Lily began to squirm, clearly uncomfortable. "Please, not now," Rachel muttered, gently loosening the baby's onesie and adjusting her blanket. But her daughter had other plans. The first cries started soft, more complaint than demand, but quickly escalated into full-throated wailing. Heads turned. One man across the aisle groaned audibly and shoved his earbuds deeper. The woman next to Rachel's side and leaned away like Rachel had just broken some social contract. Rachel rocked Lily harder, humming an off-key lullaby, her voice shaking. "It's okay, baby, I know. I know. I'm sorry." Her hands were trembling. She hadn't eaten since lunch, unless coffee counted as food. The formula had leaked in the diaper bag, so Lily had already missed a feeding. And her last paycheck, every cent, had gone into this flight. The crying only grew louder, as though echoing the desperation Rachel tried so hard to bury. From down the aisle, a flight attendant approached. Her name tag read Marcia, and her eyes were sharp, voice laced with frustration. "Ma'am, you need to quiet the baby. Other passengers are trying to rest." Rachel looked up, lips parting. I'm trying. She hasn't slept and Ma'am." The word came again like a warning shot. Rachel looked down. "Yes, sorry." Lily screamed on. Passengers shifted, some visibly annoyed, some covertly recording with their phones. Rachel's face burned with shame. She could hear the whispering, the passive huffs, the Tiskanji tongues of strangers passing judgment. "Maybe you should have booked a daytime flight," someone muttered behind her. Rachel blinked against tears. "I didn't have a choice," she whispered. To no one in particular. To everyone. She considered fleeing to the airplane bathroom, locking herself in, rocking Lily until she passed out or the flight landed, whichever came first. But she couldn't even move. Her knees were stiff, her arms heavy, and Lily's wails were unraveling her one breath at a time. In that moment, Rachel felt utterly and devastatingly alone. Then, a voice, gentle but firm, cut through the chaos beside her. "Excuse me," it said low and warm. "Would you mind if I tried something?" Rachel turned her head slowly, unsure if she had imagined the voice. Her senses were dulled by fatigue, her thoughts wrapped in the haze of shame and helplessness. Seated beside her, in the previously unclaimed aisle seat, was a man she hadn't noticed during boarding. Maybe he had arrived late, maybe she had just been too overwhelmed to register his presence. Either way, he was here now. Relaxed posture, navy blue suit immaculate despite the cramped space, and a quiet confidence that contrasted sharply with the storm unraveling in Rachel's arms. He looked about 30, with his striking eyes that met hers without judgment. His tone hadn't been patronizing, and his expression held not the weariness of the other passengers, but a curiosity and, Rachel blinked to be sure, a hint of kindness. "I've got a little experience," he said gently, nodding toward Lily. "My sister has 3 kids under 5. I've learned a trick or two." Rachel instinctively clutched Lily tighter. She had every reason to be cautious. People were unpredictable, especially with babies involved. And yet, this man didn't have the smugness of someone trying to fix the poor girl's mess. His body language was open. His smile was reassuring, not rehearsed. And above all, she was desperate. I don't know," she stammered. "She doesn't usually let strangers." "No pressure," he said, raising his hands slightly in surrender. "But sometimes a new voice, a different rhythm, it helps." Lily hiccuped through her cries, little fists clenched against Rachel's shirt. The flight attendant had returned to her station. The whispering passengers were still watching, murmuring their opinions. And Rachel just wanted a moment to breathe. Her arms were trembling with fatigue. Her mind ached from the guilt. "Okay," she said finally. "Just for a moment. Please be careful." The man nodded once and slowly reached out. His hands were large, confident, but not rushed. He supported Lily's head instinctively, like someone who'd actually done this before, and drew her gently against his shoulder. At first, Lily wriggled. Her body tensed, one last defiant wail rising from her tiny chest. Then something changed. The man began to hum. Not a song Rachel recognized, but a melody simple and soothing. He rubbed slow circles on Lily's back, his fingers precise, steady. The change was immediate. Lily's sobs melted into soft whimpers. Then into hiccups. Then into nothing at all. Rachel stared. The entire cabin seemed to hold its breath, unsure how to react to this small, silent miracle. A baby who had wailed endlessly now lay still, cradled on the shoulder of a stranger in a tailored suit. The same passengers who had scowled moments ago now blinked in confusion. Some even smiled awkwardly, unsure how to recalibrate their annoyance. Rachel exhaled, a sound that came out more like a sob. Her shoulders sagged, her whole frame deflating from the tension she hadn't even realized she'd been holding. She started, not knowing how to finish. "That was thank you." The man chuckled lightly. "She's got good taste. Most people just cry harder when they see me." Rachel allowed herself a tiny smile. Clearly she has better judgment than most adults. Lily snuggled deeper into his chest, a tiny hand grasping the lapel of his jacket like she'd known him all her life. "You're a miracle worker," Rachel murmured, wiping her eyes with the corner of her sleeve. She suddenly became aware of how she must look. Disheveled hair, dark circles, the smell of baby formula and exhaustion clinging to her clothes. She adjusted her hoodie, as if it might erase the struggle from her face. "I'm Rachel," she said softly. The man shifted slightly, careful not to wake the baby. "Ethan," he replied. "Nice to meet you, Rachel. And this little one." "Lily." He smiled down at her. "She's beautiful." The sincerity in his voice made Rachel's throat tighten. She wasn't used to compliments, let alone ones that felt so undeserved. Ethan shifted to allow her a bit more room, and without thinking, Rachel leaned back in her seat, a sigh escaping her lips. The sound of Lily's slow breathing was like a balm over her frayed nerves. Within minutes, her head began to drift sideways, her neck losing the battle against gravity. Her temple brushed against Ethan's shoulder. She startled, about to jerk away, but his body didn't flinch. He didn't shift or pull away. If anything, his shoulder relaxed slightly, allowing her a more comfortable place to rest. I can take her back, she whispered. You're okay, he said quietly. Close your eyes. Just for a bit. She didn't remember deciding to trust him. But she did. As the hum of the plane engines droned around them, and the cabin lights dimmed into a muted blue, Rachel's eyes fluttered closed. Her last thought before sleep claimed her was a mixture of disbelief and gratitude. That someone, a stranger in a suit, had reached into her chaos and calmed the storm. Somewhere over Nebraska, while the rest of the plane slept beneath dim cabin lights, Rachel dreamt she was floating, weightless, warm, unburdened. It was the kind of sleep that comes only after extreme exhaustion, deep, quiet, and complete. She stirred only when a sudden jolt of turbulence made the plane shudder. Her body tensed instinctively, her eyes fluttering open, first blurry, then slowly coming into focus. It took her a moment to realize where she was. Her head was resting on a man's shoulder. Ethan. Her lips parted in silent horror as she saw the small damp spot on the fabric of his expensive suit. Oh no. I drooled, she mumbled aloud, barely above a whisper. He looked down at her, amused. Only a little, he said, his smile easy and without mockery. Could have been worse. You could have snored. Rachel sat up abruptly, brushing a hand across her face. Her cheeks were burning. God, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to fall asleep on you. Don't apologize, Ethan said, adjusting Lily carefully in his arms. You looked like you needed it. She rubbed her eyes. How long was I out? About an hour. Rachel blinked. An hour? I haven't slept that long in days. Ethan's tone softened. I figured. Lily was still asleep, one tiny fist curled up under her chin, her body relaxed. The contrast between now and just an hour earlier was staggering. Rachel leaned forward slightly, brushing a strand of hair from Lily's forehead. She's not always like that. Usually she's really sweet. I believe you, Ethan said. Planes throw babies off. Honestly, they throw adults off. Rachel allowed herself a brief laugh, one that came out lighter than expected. It was the first time in weeks she hadn't felt like a failure just for existing in public. Thanks for not judging me, she said after a pause. Most people just glare or whisper or film it for TikTok. People forget what it's like to be human, he replied. Or they've never had to work this hard just to get from one day to the next. Rachel glanced at him curiously. You say that like you've been there. He gave a small shrug. Not exactly. I've been fortunate. But I know what it's like to watch someone struggle. My mom raised 3 of us alone while my dad didn't. Let's just say I've seen the other side of success. Rachel studied him again, seeing beyond the polished exterior now. Beneath the suit, the perfect haircut, the watch that cost more than her monthly rent. There was something grounded in him. You're not just some guy who wandered into coach for the thrill of suffering, are you? She asked, half joking. Ethan chuckled. Actually, I gave up my seat in first so one of our board members could have more space. The joys of being the boss. Rachel's eyebrows rose. Board member? Boss. He shifted Lily slightly to his other shoulder. I run a tech company. Well, co-founded it. We're in Chicago for a conference. Normally I wouldn't be flying commercial, but I wanted to come early to check in on a foundation I work with. She blinked. You run a company and still know how to hold a baby? He smiled. Holding babies is easier than managing people. At least babies cry for a reason. That made Rachel laugh. A real one this time. She felt her body start to unwind again, as though the turbulence of the past few days was finally fading. Is it always like this? He asked suddenly. She tilted her head. Like what? Being a single mom. Rachel hesitated. The question wasn't loaded with pity, just curiosity. And maybe a little admiration. It's a constant balancing act, she said eventually. One minute I'm rocking her to sleep. The next I'm crying in the kitchen because the fridge is empty and I've got $20 to last the week. But then she smiles or giggles or reaches for me like I'm her whole world. And somehow it's all worth it. Even when I'm terrified. Ethan nodded slowly. You're doing something harder than most people will ever understand. She looked away, swallowing the lump in her throat. I just don't want her to grow up thinking she's a burden. I want her to feel safe, like she belongs in this world. You're already giving her that, he said, voice low but firm. Even if you don't see it. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing their descent into Chicago. The lights came up gradually, and passengers began to stir. Lily started to fidget in Ethan's arms, waking with a soft yawn. Rachel reached for her, gently lifting her from Ethan's chest. The baby blinked sleepily, looking between them as if confused by the switch. Thank you, Rachel said again, this time with more weight. You didn't have to help me. Most people wouldn't. I didn't help you, Ethan said with a smirk. I just made a new friend. Rachel gave him a skeptical look. He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket, pulled out a pen, and scribbled something on the back of a napkin. Just in case, he said, holding it out to her. No pressure. No expectations. But if you ever need a real chance. She took the napkin and tucked it quickly into her diaper bag without reading it. Her pride still flared at the idea of accepting anything. But maybe. As the plane touched down and they taxied toward the gate, Rachel looked out the window at the shimmering lights of Chicago. For the first time in a long while, the city didn't look cold or intimidating. It looked like possibility. Chicago's O'Hare International Airport was still half asleep in the pale glow of early morning. The jet bridge hissed as it connected to the aircraft, and passengers began rising in a slow wave of rustling jackets and rolling carry-ons. Rachel adjusted the strap of her diaper bag over her shoulder, one arm firmly around Lily, who had drifted back to sleep despite the flurry of motion around her. Ethan stood next to her in the narrow aisle, waiting patiently, not rushing like the others. For a moment, Rachel wished the flight had lasted just a little longer. She had never expected to find solace in the middle seat of an overnight flight. But somehow, that's where she had felt the safest in months. Here, Ethan said, gently reaching up and lifting her bag from the overhead bin. He held it with one hand as if it weighed nothing. Got it. Thank you, she said again. It felt like all she ever said around him. As they shuffled forward with the line, she glanced sideways at him. In the bleariness of waking life, he still looked polished. No crumpled shirt, no sleep creases on his cheek. Just calm. Kind. She found herself wanting to know more. What's your company? She asked softly. Carlisle Innovations, he replied, voice low and casual, like it wasn't a name that showed up in Forbes tech lists. We build data security software for healthcare networks and NGOs. Oh, Rachel said, trying not to let her eyes widen too much. Cool. I barely know what that means. It means I'm very boring at dinner parties. She laughed despite herself. Somehow I doubt that. They stepped off the plane into the brightness of the terminal, where announcements echoed overhead and the distant whir of floor polishers mixed with the hum of waking travelers. Rachel paused just before they parted ways. Ethan handed her the diaper bag and gave Lily a parting wave. Bye, little boss, he said with a grin. You were excellent company. Lily blinked slowly at him, then gave a sleepy smile. Rachel didn't know what to say. There were no rules for this. No etiquette handbook for what to do when a stranger holds your baby, gives you rest, and offers you kindness in the most unexpected of moments. Ethan hesitated, as if searching for the right words, then reached into his coat again and pulled out a second napkin. I gave you my number on the plane, he said. This one has the name of a nonprofit I work with in the city. It's called Northbridge Foundation. We support parents, especially single moms, who need housing, job training, childcare. Things I think you should have had all along. Rachel's pride almost flared up. Almost. But she looked into his eyes and saw no pity there. Only an open door. I don't want to insult you, he added quickly. It's not charity. It's opportunity. And you've earned it just by surviving this long. Rachel looked down at the napkin. 2 lines. A name, a website, and a short note. Ask for Angela. Tell her Ethan sent you. Rachel swallowed hard. I'll think about it. He nodded once, like he knew she wasn't the type to accept help easily. Do. And if not, well, thanks for letting me hang out with 2 of the coolest women I've met in a long time. That last line caught her off guard. A blush crept to her cheeks. She smiled awkwardly, unsure what else to say, and turned to go, then paused, turned halfway back. Ethan. He looked up. I'm really glad you were in that seat. He gave a small bow of his head. So am I. And just like that, they drifted apart, her to baggage claim, him toward the escalators that led to the conference suites. The moment was over, like a dream that lingers even after you've woken. But as she walked toward the exit, Rachel slipped the second napkin into the side pocket of her bag. She didn't throw it away, didn't crumple it or pretend it hadn't been given. Instead, she kept walking, with her daughter in her arms and a fragile, flickering hope she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. Not love. Not yet. But something close to it. Something that felt like the beginning of a different kind of story. Rachel stood on the rain-damp curb outside Terminal 3, watching the parade of taxis and rideshares stream past like yellow and black streaks in the early morning gray. The cold Chicago air bit through her hoodie, cutting sharply against the humidity of the airplane. Lily whimpered against her chest, half awake and fussing beneath the blanket. Almost there, baby girl, Rachel murmured, kissing the crown of her daughter's head. She tightened her grip on the handle of her duffel and shifted the diaper bag on her shoulder. The napkin Ethan had given her was tucked deep inside one of the side pockets, carefully folded, creased but not crumpled. She hadn't looked at it again. Not yet. Her pride sat like a stone in her chest, heavy and unmovable. The ride to Chanel's apartment was quiet. Her Uber driver, a gruff man in his 50s, didn't ask questions, didn't play music, didn't make small talk. Rachel was grateful. The city passed by in slow snapshots, wet sidewalks, empty parks, steel gray skies reflecting in the puddles. She hadn't been back in Chicago in almost 2 years. It felt strange now, too familiar and too foreign all at once. When the car stopped outside the old brownstone, Rachel exhaled slowly. The building hadn't changed. Still 3 floors of chipped brick and weather-worn trim. The buzzer had never worked. She dialed her sister's number and waited. A click. Hello. It's me. A pause. Then Chanel's voice again, slightly groggy. You made it? Yeah. We're outside. Another pause. Then, 3rd floor. Doors open. The call ended. Rachel climbed the stairs slowly, her legs still sore from the flight and her arms cramping under Lily's weight. At the landing, the apartment door stood ajar. She pushed it open and stepped inside. Chanel was standing in the kitchen in a robe, her dark curls pulled up in a messy bun. Her eyes went straight to the baby. Is that her? Rachel nodded, not sure what to expect. Chanel crossed the room and gently pulled back the blanket. Lily blinked up at her, wide-eyed. She's cute, Chanel said simply. Looks like you. Rachel smiled faintly. Thanks. An awkward silence bloomed between them, thick and unavoidable. They hadn't fought exactly, not out loud. But after Rachel missed last Christmas and Chanel refused to lend money the month before that, a quiet tension had settled between them like dust. I made coffee, Chanel said after a beat. You hungry? Starving. The next hour passed in the fragile rhythm of 2 people trying to remember how to be family. Chanel bounced Lily while Rachel ate scrambled eggs and toast. They talked about the wedding, about the guest list, about how their mom would be flying in tomorrow, and still insisted on bringing tamales no one liked. It wasn't easy, but it wasn't broken either. Later, when Lily was napping in the borrowed pack, end play in the corner of Chanel's room, Rachel finally unzipped the diaper bag and took out the napkin. This time, she unfolded it fully. The handwriting was smooth, clean, confident, black ink from a fountain pen. It read, Northbridge Foundation, ask for Angela. You deserve more than survival. Let us help. Ethan. She ran her finger over the letters, tracing the curve of his name. She thought about the way Lily had gone quiet in his arms, the way he had spoken to her. Not with pity, but with respect. With belief. Rachel didn't trust easily. Life had taught her not to. But something about Ethan felt different. He hadn't offered her money. He hadn't tried to rescue her. He had just seen her. Seen the exhaustion, the effort, the worth. She stared at the napkin for a long time, then pulled out her phone. She didn't dial the number yet, but she saved it, just in case. Just in case this was the moment where her story stopped spiraling and began to climb. Outside, the city hummed with life. Buses roared past. Children played hopscotch in the apartment courtyard. Pigeons darted beneath fire escapes. And Rachel, for the first time in a long while, let herself hope. The next 2 days moved in a blur of white lace, scented candles, and distant relatives with too many opinions. Chanel's apartment transformed into wedding headquarters. Garment bags draped over door frames, half-eaten cupcakes on the kitchen counter, curling ribbon in the sink. Lily spent most of her time being passed from one doting aunt to another, cooed over and kissed until she was so overstimulated that she fell asleep with her face buried in Rachel's collarbone, fists balled up in protest. Rachel tried her best to be present, to help with decorations and centerpieces, to tie name cards with twine that frayed and snapped. But her mind kept drifting, not to what had gone wrong in the past, or to what she'd failed to do, but to what if. What if she called? What if Ethan hadn't just been a kind moment on a bad flight? What if it wasn't pity? The napkin remained in her wallet, folded carefully behind her bus pass and a worn grocery list. Every time she reached for something, she saw it there, waiting, silently offering. It wasn't until the night before the wedding, after Chanel had gone to bed and Lily was finally asleep in the borrowed bassinet, that Rachel slipped out onto the balcony with her phone. The city buzzed below her, headlights slicing through the dark. Across the street, a man was walking a dog wrapped in a red sweater. In a window to her left, someone was playing jazz low and slow. Rachel exhaled. She opened her phone and searched for Northbridge Foundation. The website loaded with a clean, simple interface. Blue and gray colors, a tagline across the top in bold white letters. Rebuilding lives. One bridge at a time. She scrolled through photos, women in classrooms holding children, planting gardens. Testimonials filled the bottom of the page. I came here with nothing but my daughter and fear. Now I have a career, a home, and a future. They didn't just help me. They believed in me when I didn't know how to. Rachel swallowed hard. Her thumb hovered over the Contact Us button. Then she saw the name, Angela Moore, Program Director. Exactly what Ethan had written. She didn't think, just tapped. A simple contact form opened, but Rachel went to the phone number instead. Her fingers shook as she dialed. Half of her expected a voicemail, or a gatekeeper who would make her explain her life story before offering a crumb of help. But the line only rang twice. Northbridge Foundation, this is Angela. Her voice was calm, strong, the kind of voice that could command a room without raising volume. Hi, Rachel said, suddenly unsure how to speak. My name's Rachel Carter. I was told to ask for you. By someone named Ethan Carlisle? A pause, then a subtle shift in Angela's voice. Warmth. Recognition. Of course. Ethan mentioned you might call. I'm really glad you did, Rachel. Do you have a few minutes to talk? Yes, she said, and felt the tears start to rise. I think I really need this. And just like that, a door opened. Angela didn't ask for a resume. She didn't interrogate or question. She asked what Rachel wanted, what she needed, what she dreamed of doing if someone could just take a little bit of the weight off her shoulders. They talked for nearly 20 minutes. By the time Rachel hung up, her hands were shaking, but not from fear. From possibility. She stared at her phone screen, still lit with the call summary. Then she looked back through the balcony window to where Lily slept peacefully on the couch, a tiny fist curled beside her face. Rachel pressed her palm to the glass, tears welling in her eyes. She hadn't felt like a mother who could give her daughter a better life. Not until tonight. But now maybe she could be. The sun was warm for early spring in Chicago, streaking through the tall windows of the Northbridge Foundation's Southside campus. Outside, community gardens had just begun to bloom, the first yellow crocuses poking up through thawed soil. Inside, a dozen women sat in a sunlit classroom, some bouncing toddlers on their knees, others taking notes with furrowed brows. Rachel sat among them. 6 weeks had passed since the wedding. 6 weeks since she'd made the call. She had nearly backed out twice. Even after her intake interview with Angela went smoothly, and they offered her not just a spot in the parenting support program, but a full-ride scholarship to a pediatric nursing certification track. Rachel still almost let fear talk her out of it. But Chanel had looked her in the eye and said, "You've always been strong, Rach. But you don't have to do this alone anymore." That stuck. Now here she was, 3 days into orientation, Lily enrolled in the on-site childcare center down the hall, her mind crammed full of possibilities. And for the first time in years, Rachel didn't feel like an imposter in her own life. She felt capable. During lunch, she wandered through the courtyard, watching a group of little kids chase bubbles near a water feature. One of them let out a shriek of joy, and Rachel smiled to herself. "Feels good, doesn't it?" a voice said behind her. She turned, and there he was, Ethan. He stood in a navy bomber jacket and jeans, far more casual than she'd ever seen him, but still unmistakably himself. He wasn't holding a laptop or giving a tour or making a speech. He was just there, hands in his pockets, soft smile in his eyes. "You're here," Rachel said, surprised. "Angela said you were back in New York." "I was. But I come back every few weeks to check on things. And I heard someone special joined the program." She flushed. "You're not stalking your success stories, are you?" "Only the exceptional ones," he said, grinning. They stood in a moment of shared quiet, the breeze ruffling her loose hair, the hum of children echoing in the background. "I wanted to say thank you," she said, voice steady but soft. "Not just for the flight, for seeing something in me, for not making it feel like charity." "I never saw you as someone who needed saving, Rachel," he replied. "I saw someone already fighting. I just wanted to put a sword in your hand." She smiled, a little stunned by how easily his words sank into her chest. They didn't make her feel small. They made her feel tall. "And for the record," he added, "you've already done more in 6 weeks than most people do with twice the privilege. You're rewriting your whole story." "I'm trying," she said, glancing toward the classroom windows. "It's hard." "Good. That means it's real." They walked slowly along the edge of the garden path, the scent of fresh earth and early blossoms hanging in the air. Rachel tucked her hands into the pockets of her cardigan, a thoughtful look on her face. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you hadn't been on that flight," she said. "I would have still been in the air," Ethan said with a shrug. "But I wouldn't have met someone who reminded me what this place is really for." She looked up at him, eyes narrowing with playful suspicion. "You're not flirting with me, are you?" "I'm being respectful," he said, smirking. "If I were flirting, I'd have brought coffee." She laughed then, full and loud, startling a pigeon nearby. He smiled at the sound, like it was music he hadn't heard in a long time. Rachel reached into her tote bag and pulled out a small notebook, flipping it open. She handed him the napkin, the original one from the flight. Still folded, still neatly preserved. Slightly wrinkled, but intact. "I kept it," she said. He took it carefully, his fingers brushing hers. "Most people throw out airplane napkins." "I'm not most people," she replied, lifting one eyebrow. Ethan grinned. "Thank God for that." 6 months later, the gymnasium at the North Bridge Foundation had been transformed. Streamers fluttered from the rafters. Folded chairs lined the walls. Rows of proud parents, children, mentors, and supporters clapped and cheered as names were called one by one from the small stage at the front. Rachel stood in line with 12 other women, all dressed in matching navy blue sashes, each holding a white folder stamped with the words, "North Bridge Certification Program, Pediatric Nursing Track." Her hands trembled slightly as she stepped forward at the sound of her name. Rachel Carter. The applause was deafening, at least to her. Not because of the volume, but because of what it meant. It wasn't just noise. It was recognition, validation. A storm weathered. A battle survived. She climbed the 3 wooden steps to the platform and shook Angela's hand with reverence. Angela leaned in, whispered, "Told you, you were meant for this." Rachel could only smile, tears pricking at the corners of her eyes as she looked out over the audience. There, front and center, sat Chanel, holding a squirming but delighted Lily, now a sturdy 1-year-old with wild curls and a toothy grin. And next to them, wearing a dark gray blazer and that same unshakable calm, was Ethan. His eyes met hers. He smiled. She couldn't look away. After the ceremony, the crowd spilled into the garden courtyard, now strung with lights and the sound of live acoustic guitar. Laughter rang out. Plastic cups of punch clinked in celebratory toasts. Toddlers chased balloons in and out of folding chair legs. Rachel stood by the punch table, still clutching her certificate, as if it might vanish if she loosened her grip. "You did it," came Ethan's voice behind her. She turned. "I know. I keep thinking someone's going to call me out, like, 'Sorry, we made a mistake. We meant the other Rachel.'" He chuckled. "No mistake." They stood for a moment, just watching Lily wobble across the grass, Chanel close behind her. "She's so happy now," Rachel said quietly. "I didn't realize how tense she was before. It's like, when I got safe, she did too." "That's how it works," Ethan said. "Kids carry what we carry, even if we think we're hiding it." Rachel looked at him, searching his face. She'd learned a lot about him over the past few months. About the foundation he built in his mother's name. About the nights he still stayed late at the office, and the mornings he showed up at Northbridge just to read books to toddlers. He had never pressured her. Never made her feel like she owed him anything. But he had stayed. "Can I ask you something personal?" she said. "Of course." She hesitated then. "Why me?" There were a dozen women on that flight. 100 on every street corner in this city with stories just as hard. Ethan looked at her seriously. "Because you didn't ask for anything," he said. "You didn't beg. You didn't play small. You were doing the hardest thing I've ever seen someone do. And you kept doing it. Even when no one clapped. Even when no one helped." Rachel felt the tears rise again, but didn't fight them this time. "I don't know what this is between us," she said. "But I do know I'm not who I used to be. And I think I'd like to see where it goes." Ethan smiled, and it wasn't the charming CEO smile she'd seen that night on the plane. It was softer, warmer, real. "Then let's figure it out," he said. "One flight at a time." She leaned into him slightly, just enough to feel the warmth of his shoulder against hers. This time, it wasn't exhaustion that made her lean. It was choice. Across the lawn, Lily laughed as she tumbled into the grass, Chanel scooping her up with a squeal. The air was thick with the smell of summer beginning, hope blooming. Rachel closed her eyes for a moment and breathed it in. She had boarded that plane months ago as a woman barely holding herself together. Now she stood in sunlight in her cap and gown, a future in her hands. Not because someone had saved her, but because someone had reminded her she could fly. We have come to the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting stories.